Purple Butterfly Healing Center proudly presents Let's Play Canada, a listening series that aims to give voice to child and play therapists, supervisors, interns, and all lovers of play. May the therapeutic powers of play be elevated here in Canada by highlighting voices and promoting connection across the country. Telling our stories and hearing the stories of others stitches together a collective narrative of the healing landscape across our great country. I am Billie-Jo, registered social worker and Canadian play therapy supervisor, owner and clinical director of the Purple Butterfly Healing Center in Cambridge, Ontario. Our first series, which I am so very pleased to bring to your listening ears, is our Living Legends series, focusing on play therapy experts across Canada. So welcome. We have Lorie Walton here today. She is a registered psychotherapist. She has a master's of education. She's certified in play therapy as well as being a certified play therapy supervisor. She supervises and trains as a Theraplay supervisor and trainer. She's a certified gentle sleep coach and owner of Family First Play Therapy in Bradford and Burlington. And as well, she's the executive director of Theraplay Canada. I just want to say thank you so much for being here, Lorie. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be finally meeting you face to face, Billie-Jo, and connecting with you in this way.
Well, you're part of this Living Legends series of my podcast that I've been, working away at here. You've been very influential in Canada in the way that you have been able to train people and, the work that you're doing with Theraplay Canada, as well as the clinics that you've opened. And so what I'm wondering is, you've got a master's in education. I'm assuming that's where you started off. But what I'm hoping you'll be able to share with us is, how you became a play therapist, how you became a play therapy supervisor, and how you became to love play therapy and all that you do.
Well, thank you. It's quite a story, and it makes me chuckle when you say a living legend. I am in the older side of the next stage of life here, but I'm very proud of the journey that I've been on for the play therapy community. Back in the day, I became a teacher. I was passionate about working with children and became a teacher and really enjoyed that experience. I was an elementary school teacher. I taught kindergarten. I taught grade 1. And at one point, and I was teaching special needs resource. I was a special needs resource teacher in the school board that I was raising our family in. And I loved that job. I actually went after that job. I was working part-time as a kindergarten teacher. And when this position opened up, I went to the principal and I said, I want that job. And he said, why? You've got the best. You've got, little kids at home. You're working part-time. It's the best. This is a full-time position. I said, I don't know why I want it, but I just really want it. And I can do the job really well. So the kind man gave me the job, and I really enjoyed that position. And while I was at that position, we were fairly busy, but at the same time, I was looking to do something different outside of teaching and just for my own personal enrichment. And I was reading the paper one day, and I saw that there was an ad in the paper, the local paper, that was advertising for a board member for Blue Hills Child and Family Center. Excuse me. And that is a ministry-funded agency. It's renamed now, but is a ministry agency was in Aurora, just outside of our community. So I applied for that position, as it's a voluntary position, and I was accepted on that board. And while I was on that board, I was able to learn all about the wonderful services that they offer to children and families. And Evangeline Munns was part of that facility. She was the lead psychologist in that facility. She was the head of their play therapy department, which I'd never heard of before. And she had one time came to a board meeting and gave us a little chat about the play therapy department and Theraplay. And I took my board hat off and put my teacher hat on, and I went, oh, this sounds really wonderful. I think that students that I'm working with in my school would benefit from this technique. So I went to my principal. I said, there's a training coming up. Can I get your permission and attend the training? And he gave me a bit of a hard time. He was going to say yes, but he said, you need to write down why this is going to be beneficial, blah, blah, blah. So he made me really work hard for the answer that he was going to give me anyway. And lo and behold, I went and took training with Evangeline Munn at the Theraplay training. And it spoke my language. I loved it. It was what I was needing to do with the children in the school to help them feel nurtured and accepted and be who they could be, their best selves. And so that was my start to the journey of Theraplay. I went back to the school and I started implementing Theraplay groups with my little group of special needs children.
Wow.
I had the capacity to pull them out of their peer age groupings, pull them together. We did it regularly. And after the first part of the year, after doing it regularly and really seeing some lovely results, the principal came to me and said, so, you're doing it with your group of children. Would you be open to doing it with some other primary school age children who really need support? They're not coming, they have rough homes. They're coming from underprivileged experiences, and this would be really lovely to help them in the school setting. So I said, yes, of course. So I took in that group of children and started doing some Theraplay. And at that time, I was still learning Theraplay. I was teaching. I was running the groups at the school, but I was also going to Blue Hills on my own time at night to be in the practicum and do Theraplay with individual children and families. So I was learning Theraplay to do with individual children and families. I wasn't taught how to do Theraplay in groups, but I was taking that format and pulling it into and doing it with the children in the school. And at that time, when he came back to me a second time and said, so you're doing it with your special needs children, you're doing it with the elementary school children, would you be open to doing it with the grade 6, 7, and 8 kids who really need some support? The kids that are always in trouble or in the office. And I'm like, well, those are kids that I'm just like a little bit anxious about working with. But I thought, okay, let's give it a go. And at the time, when I was working with them, I thought, I don't know how to change Theraplay in any other way. I'm just going to follow the protocol because I didn't want to take the risk of changing it up or modifying it too much. I wish I'd videotaped these groups because they were just really phenomenal. And it was really, really lovely to be able to implement Theraplay in the school. This is a long time ago. This is over 25 years ago, where we had permission from the parents. We weren't allowed to call it Theraplay in the school because they didn't do therapy in the schools, quote unquote. We were allowed to call it play group, so we just called it play group. And the parents were aware. They were always invited. Sometimes they would pop in and join with us. I had some EA support so that it wasn't just me there without support for the children. And we would do Theraplay from top to bottom 2 or 3 times a week. Pull the kids in, do a formal Theraplay session where we would go through the whole regime of noticing and nurturing and including food for them and playing these structured, lovely games. And the results were beautiful. One particular story stands out in my mind where with our children who had special needs, there were a variety of different developmental levels in that group of kids. Some were verbal, some were nonverbal, some were on the spectrum, some were physically disabled so that they weren't able to really do much physically without the support of an adult there helping them. But every time we played our group, they would come in, They would be excited and they would participate as much as they could. And we would use the modifications for voice and activity and all of those things. We'd make all of those modifications. And one day we did it day in and day out for these children. And one day in the spring, as teachers are supposed to be out on lunch duty or recess duty, I was out on recess duty in the yard where the bigger kids were. And one of our EAs came over to me running, like out of breath. Lorie, you've got to get to the primary yard. Go now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what crisis is happening? What now kind of thing. And she said, just look for a little boy named Claudio. So I'm like, okay, he's one of our special needs students. Okay, gosh, I'll look. So over I go, and there was Claudio leading one of the Theraplay games. We used to play What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf in the classroom with within the Theraplay groups that we have, and we played it so many times. They loved it. Here he was leading it himself outside on the playground with a group of children, some of which were our special needs children, and others were joining from his peer age classroom, and he was leading the way. And he didn't stand out as a special needs child. He stood out. He didn't stand out at all. He looked like a leader. He was one of the kids.
Isn't that incredible?
It was incredible. And back then we didn't have cell phones that had cameras or videotaping ability. I wish that I had that so that I could have shown his mom that he was a kid that day.
Oh,
great. It was so great.
I have goosebumps. That brings me a little bit to tears.
Me too, because I can still see it to this day. He was great. So each of the kids in those groups found their own way and developed and felt a part of the group. They felt connected. It really supported their peers' social ability and their social skills and their self-esteem. So that for me was the pivotal moment that said, I always knew prior to that I wasn't going to teach forever, that there was something else that I was going to be doing, but I didn't know what that was. There was this nagging thing all the time with me. I loved the kids. I loved the parents. Didn't necessarily love the bureaucracy of school, administration, all that stuff. But overall, I just kind of knew that there was something else out there for me. And at that time, I went, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be, and I had already discovered through Theraplay, I'd already heard about play therapy. So I was already starting the process of becoming, starting the workshops and doing the workshop of the play therapy end. And nobody had ever heard of those things before back in my day. Like those words didn't exist out there, not just in school, but in communities, play therapy, what the heck is that? People would come up and say, what are you going to do? Teach kids how to play? And I'm like, no, I'm a therapist. I use tools to play or to use to help the kids express themselves. So at that time I went, and I had I have a very supportive husband and family. I was raising 3 children who were middle school age by this time. And I just went, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up my own play therapy center. Aww. And my husband said, go for it. And I'm like, really? Because I said, I can't do this halfway. Like I'm the type of person that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all in. I need to do it right from the start properly. And he said, okay, let's find a place that we can rent that you can just set up your spot. So we did. And I took a leave of absence from school, never looked back, never went back. And just that's how Family First started. And it was in this tiny little office that had a little nook for me and my desk, an open room that was more like a Theraplay kind of place that we could do some Theraplaying, and a small little play therapy room filled with all the tools that we need, puppets and sand, but it was really, really tiny. And I had them put in a one-way window, a one-way mirror, so that I could do the Marshak and do the observations, and it was connected to the play therapy room. And that was my little start. It was just me. And I went every day to this little tiny office and just started, writing notes to letters to doctors and school boards and letting people know that I was out there reaching out. And I got my first client through somebody who was at a doctor's office who saw my little pamphlet and went, "Oh, I need this for one of the children." She was a social worker, children that she was in charge of, a foster child. And it just kind of started snowballing from there.
Wow. And so when was that? How long
Oh my
ago?
gosh, that was back. I opened Family First on in August of 2000.
August of 2020, almost 23.
23 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. So, and then so it grew obviously, and it's continuing to grow.
Yes, I was there in that little tiny spot for about 2 or 3 years. And my vision was, and I was working towards becoming a supervisor. My vision was, I want to mentor. I've always been a teacher at heart, I guess.
Wow.
So I wanted to mentor others and help play therapy grow. By this time, I was already involved in the Canadian Association for Child and Play Therapy. I was the newsletter person, and there was no association management. And Betty Bedard Bidwell and all the wonderful, esteemed people that were involved in that right from the start, were still on board in there. And the first year I was the newsletter person. The next year she was stepping down. I can't remember if she was the president at the time or somebody else was. I believe it was her, but she was stepping down, and I put my hand up.
Aw.
uh, I'll do it. Nobody else wanted the president's position. So I stepped in,
Wow.
and then I was the president for, gosh, over 6 years, 7 years, and then brought in Teresa. From me, I brought in Teresa. But when I was the president, it was our mandate to look for an association management company. And so, we had a committee. Leanna Lowenstein was on that committee. I remember that. I can't remember who else was on it, but we were a group that, put our heads together and went, okay, we're going to look for a variety of different options there. And we went into Toronto to interview a variety of different association management companies. And we found Kip and Elizabeth.
Mm.
And so we hired them. And it turned from us not having to put all the pieces together, sit there every night and lick the stamps and put the
Right.
newsletters in the blah, 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 and mail them out and do all of that. Kip and Elizabeth took over those pieces. And then the mandate was, let's grow this across Canada.
Yeah.
So we began to really work with them, with their guidance and support, and the board at the time. And we really focused on growing it across Canada and making alliances through other, associations, internationally and nationally.
Wow.
So, yeah. So,
That's
so that,
incredible.
yeah. And at the same time, I was building my practice. And so I was building my practice, and I felt, oh gosh, like play therapy, really, there is something to this. We all know this when we're doing the work with the kids that we're working with. We can see the result. We need to get this going. And so I had a vision that I wanted to support those who were wanting to learn about play therapy, and I needed a bigger space. So again, I put my head down and moved into a space down the road that was just ideal, and that is still the space I am in. And yeah, it's still there, and we still have that location. And I just started to bring in those who were in training
Uh-huh.
and those who wanted to learn about play therapy and support me with the clients that we had at Family First.
Uh-huh.
So we now have 2 locations. Family First now has 2 locations. We just expanded last year into Burlington. And we chose Burlington because I speak of we because I have a lovely supportive team behind me. My husband, my family, my colleagues, all of that. So I don't consider it just mine.
Right.
Family First is a family. And so we chose Burlington because my husband was raised in Burlington. I grew up in Oakville, and the psychologist that has joined my practice was raised in Burlington as well. And it just seemed like the right space to go to. It was familiar. We still have family there. It was kind of going back to our home roots. and we wanted to support, the community. There's some great services already in that community, but there can never be too many, right? There's a lot of wait lists everywhere. And so we felt that Burlington was the right space to go. And yeah, so now Family First has 2 locations, and we've got a lot of therapists working for us and supporting the children and families. And it's very exciting. It's a lot of work, but it's very exciting.
It's very inspirational when you talk about it and where it started on the playground, watching that little boy,
Yeah.
and gosh, it's just such an amazing thing that you're able to bring in people that are learning to do the work and mentor them and give back to the communities. And so yeah, just very inspirational. Thank you so much, Lorie.
It's been really rewarding work, though. It's not for me. I've always just been driven for each of these kids that come through the door. You hear the story when you take the intake call, and you think, oh my gosh, I used to, at least in those early days, I think, oh, I don't know, how can I help? Like, I'm not sure I'm the right person. And then the little child would walk in the door, and you're like, oh, it's a child. Of course, we'll just take it one step at a time. And I do have knowledge about, how to begin, but and work with the child. But at the start, it was a little intimidating when I get the call thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. And then the child would walk in the door, and it was just a lovely little child who had challenges in front of them and a family that was trying to figure it out. And we just walked the walk together.
Yeah. I love the way that you say that, walk the walk together and one step at a time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I think that as new clinicians, we're just so overwhelmed with the idea that we have to like fix, or we have to like, produce something. This is sort of a topic that's come up in other interviews as well. And, so like the idea of one step at a time, walking the walk,
Yeah.
it's just like, how do you describe that? Like, what is that for you?
Well, I like to suggest and support the supervisees when they're saying, I have this case, and here we are, and I'm kind of gone this way, and I'm stuck now. Like, what do I do next? Should I just end because we're not getting anywhere? Often we kind of plateau, and it feels like we're not being productive, or reaching the goals, or getting, working on the goals. And my response to that is, well, sometimes it is appropriate to end because you might have reached the goals. And of course, it's not appropriate to continue on therapy forever and ever. You want to help them expand and work and live in their life without, those extra supports if they can do it. That's our goal for them, for sure. But for some of those cases where the kids are plateauing, but they haven't really healed yet, and they have still a journey ahead of them to do that, my suggestion to the supervisee and the therapist is, it's okay to just be with
Mhm.
them in the room. It's okay to celebrate this child and help the child learn who they are you don't have to talk about the trauma all the time. You don't have to go backwards. Let's look forward. Let's try instilling some hope. Many of these children don't even know what that word is, and don't have a vision or have a wish or have an insight of, what they want to go forward to. Let's try working on that. So let's just be in the room with them and start noticing these special qualities about them, and say, oh my gosh, you really talk about animals a lot. You really enjoy working with animals. Let's figure out things about animals. Let's, so as an example, just moving forward and planting the seed of helping this child see what they are good at, and
Yeah.
not stuck in their trauma or their grief or their loss or their challenges. And finding, oh my gosh, did you know that you sparkle when you smile? That's so lovely. And I just love your sparkly eyes. Let's figure out what else sparkles about you. Let's figure that out together. And then you make sparkly things. You make sparkly wands. Let's make this sparkly wand a wishing wand. If we could wish anything for you when right now you're 10, for you when you're 15, what would that wish be? Let's make this wand magic. Like, those are things that we can help the therapist go. It doesn't always have to be hard and heavy. It can be really light and playful. And sometimes it's not about anything. Sometimes it's just about being in the room and not having any pressure to accomplish anything at that time. I
Yeah.
think that's really, really good therapy.
Yeah, yes. And the idea that you might be the only one that's doing that for that child
Yes.
in that moment, right? Or in that period of time in their life, or maybe ever. Um,
Yeah. How many children um, hear from adults that notice them what they're good at and plant the seed to say, you're really good at this. You should think about maybe doing something like this when you're older as a career. I was really blessed. I had parents that told me, you're really good working with children. You should think about blah, blah, blah. And that came from me volunteering as a young kid to teach kids how to ride bikes and do a signal. You know, when you're riding a bike, you have to know
oh,
the road signal.
yeah.
I was a kid, they were looking for volunteers to help little kids learn, blah, blah, blah. And I did that. And somebody came up to me, and then my parents affirmed it later, saying, you're really good with the little kids. You should think about doing something when you are thinking about your career, moving into school, going to school after high school to work with kids. And like, kids don't think about what they're good at,
Right.
right? And so I think it's great for adults to notice that about little children and plant the seed of what their talents are, because then it gives them inspiration and confidence and an ability to look forward to go, oh, well, I can maybe do this when I grow up. You
Mhm.
know, will they, or they might not, but it gives them hope for in a vision of where they can go. There's a lot of kids in high school right now who have no idea what they're good at or what they want to do with their lives. And that's a hard place to be in high school when you're supposed to start making decisions about next steps.
Yeah, that is so true. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're saying, it just reminds me of like how important we are in encouraging that development of the sense of self, right? Just by some
Yes.
of those things that you're saying, you know?
Yes.
Um, so we have a very important job as people that were working with children as play therapists and play therapy interns. And so thank you for sharing that. I love the sparkly wand idea and making sparkly, like having a sparkly party even for those sparkly eyes and that sparkly smile. It's such a good idea.
It makes me smile a little bit because I always think of Greg Lubomir.
Okay.
Many of us have been trained, and back when I was doing the training, I can remember Greg, in our class talking to us and teaching us how to play, use the games and the tools and all of those things. He's a master at it.
Yeah.
And I can remember him saying, because somebody had said, well, I'm not very playful. I'm not sure I was playful as a kid. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I was either. I enjoy playing, but I don't know if I was super playful. And I didn't feel like I was a playful parent necessarily, although I think I was hard on myself because I think I was. But at the time when he said, what resonated with me was, he said, oh, you'll see. He says, once you start playing and you learn some of the ways I'm teaching you, he was teaching us how to think outside and make it more therapeutic type of game rather than just a board game. He said, it will snowball into you being able to do this on your own. And I'm thinking, nope, just give me the script and I'll be able to do it and I'll be fine. And, I need the book here that tells me how to do this game or that game, blah, 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 blah. And he was right, because after you do the game like Candyland or something, a few times, or feeling tic-tac-toe or whatever it is, it grows on you and you are then able to take any type of play tool and create a necessary therapeutic connection to that play tool. Like you can create any sense of. So I always think of him when I'm um, talking about turning something into a play, and many responses in the early days of becoming a play therapist, most of us have the same response that I did, saying, I don't think I could ever create these on my own. Oh, you will. You'll
Right.
see.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like having been given the permission and then feeling the freedom, right? When you
Yeah.
start to do it. Yeah.
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 Very cool. Okay. So, um, could you just take a few minutes to talk about Theraplay Canada?
Sure, I'd like to very much. It's an interesting part of my story as well. My husband had just recently, prior to Theraplay Canada, this is about 5.5 years ago, had just moved into retirement.
Oh,
And I was very busy at Family First, as always. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe it is time for us to kind of slow down a little bit. I'll start to wean down and work part time, less at Family First, get some people in place to do the bigger pieces, blah, 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 blah. And then I got a phone call from the Theraplay Institute
oh,
saying, okay, Lorie, you've been an independent trainer for Theraplay International for all of my career, for 25 years. I was trained by Phyllis Booth. I was mentored by them, by her and other esteemed Theraplay colleagues. And I had already become supervisor, trainer, all that stuff. And they said, we're looking to change our business, overall business, protocol, and we're expanding into other countries. They had already expanded in a few other countries, but they were really looking to expand into Canada. And would I be interested in taking on that affiliate? And I didn't even hesitate because it was a dream of mine. I've been after them for a really long time to say, Canada has a lot of potential. What can we do about Canada? And I said yes. So this was just like in 2019,
okay.
the mid 2019, and then so we formed the contract, and they said yes, Theraplay Canada is yours. You're in charge of it now. Blah blah blah. And we work very closely. I'm an affiliate, so we work with the Theraplay Institute and follow. It's like a McDonald's franchise. You take on, you have to follow the protocol. They're in charge of certification, but we are supportive to all of the Canadians, the professionals and Canadians who want to become trained and certified in Theraplay.
Okay.
So I said yes, and so then COVID hit in March. And
Right.
we were scheduled to go. I was scheduled to go and train out in BC for training out there, a live training. As you know, Theraplay is the first level. It's 4 days intensive. So we're gone for a week, and we do live trainings with a group of people in the room. And COVID hit, so we couldn't get there. And all of a sudden, everything was shutting down. And as we know, that the world was kind of spinning. So I said, I really want to support the people that were already paid for and signed up for this training. I think I can do this virtually. And my son had just completed his master's degree in engineering, and he had been on an online platform, and that intrigued me. So
Yeah.
I had asked him, how did that work? What was the platform? He told me the platform. I looked into it. It wasn't what I was looking for, but it sparked me enough to keep researching, and I found a different platform. And so from that other platform that I found, I created an online virtual training program.
Awesome.
We had to, otherwise it wouldn't be existing. And we actually used that for our Family First clients as well in order to conduct virtual play therapy and Theraplay sessions.
Okay.
I had always figured that we could do Theraplay virtually with military families, with deployed families, with separated families, but never had the minute to stop and figure out a way to do that. But this was our minute to stop and figure out how to do it. So at the same time I was doing that for Family First clients, I was also figuring it out how to do it for Theraplay Canada. And so I developed this 1 month's worth of training of level 1, but it's somewhat individual webinar posted on the learning platform. And then we meet once a week for a month, 4 times through Zoom, and do our live 4-hour sessions of learning and training and playing and discussing and going through the motions of practicing Theraplay and the MEM for that month. And so at the end of that month, they have completed their level 1 Theraplay. And it's been a wonderful experience, a growth experience. But what is the most exciting is that instead of people having to take a full week off work, pay to get themselves to that training, pay for the training, pay themselves to get to that training, all the while not getting paid for the time that they've taken off work if they're an independent practitioner, pay for accommodations, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're able to just take a half a day off work once a week for a month and be able to afford the training, stay within, their own communities, practice it through that month with the supervision and support of the trainers that are involved with them for that whole month. And now we're reaching parts of Canada that never had the opportunity to join or be trained, which I'm sure a CAPT has experienced the same thing. There are people taking training now that might not have ever had that opportunity. So we've reached the far north corners of Canada and out east and out west, and the north, the communities in the far reaches of Manitoba, and like it's really, really, really affirming to know that we're able to support across Canada, truly across Canada.
That's
And
incredible.
yeah, and so from the year 2020, which is when we started, to the end of 2022, we just started our 2023 year, and I just had my board meeting the other day, so all the figures are in my mind still. We have taught 534 individuals in Theraplay across Canada.
Wow.
So far.
Amazing.
And so that means that there are communities that are now getting Theraplay
Right.
and being supported. So it's just really, really exciting.
That is
And
very
yeah, so that's what we do in Theraplay Canada. We support the individuals and professionals looking to work with children with this modality, and it's a really great modality. I'm obviously very passionate about it, but I'm passionate about it because it's a really nice foundational modality that can be integrated in other forms of play therapy, right? You can do, in my practice, we do a combination of individual play therapy and then end with a little bit of Theraplay. So that joining of the parent creates that better connection and relationship. The parent is really supported through those experiences because we're teaching the parent about the benefits of using structure, engagement, nurture, and challenge, giving them some extra tools because they've tried everything they know to work with the kids. It's a really lovely supportive modality that really helps foundationally. And then because it's foundational, it really is a technique that is, we're not talking about trauma. We're not talking about the past or whatever. We're just in the here and now. We're creating a sense of better connection, a more positive relationship. And we all need more positive relationship when we're healing. We can lean into that person who can, make us feel good, make us notice us, nurture us through those harder parts, which then allows the child to go into the cognitive behavior components of healing.
Right.
So Theraplay is a foundational. It doesn't tap into those higher brain regions. It taps into the lower brain regions and really creates a sense of security and a foundation of strength and resiliency. And then you can begin to work on those higher levels of trauma healing, and regulation healing, because you've got somebody kind of there soothing you and supporting you through that process, which gives you the ability to self-regulate and relax your brain enough to be able to go into those higher cognitive regions to work on the mastery.
Yeah, I think about like the way that the brain structures are probably changing, right? As you're doing the Theraplay activities and the co-regulation and the attunement and the noticing, and how wonderful. I don't know if this has even happened yet, but a lot of modalities, well, not a lot of modalities. I'm trained in EMDR, so I know of some, fMRI studies that have been done around EMDR pre and post, where there's actually, changes in the brain. You can actually see them. So I don't know if that's happened with Theraplay, but I bet you it would be.
Absolutely.
Has that happened? Are there studies?
Yes, there's always studies going on. It is evidence-based now. There are even, actual studies that are looking and comparing those pieces. What's great to know is that the EMDR can be paired with Theraplay. I had a therapist who was studying EMDR, had already learned Theraplay, and she had this vision of, can I do these two, with the client, because there's such value in both. And they're tapping into different parts, but in a similar way. They're very complementary. and incorporate the play therapy as well. So it's just beautiful work. And it really is in support of the healing process for the client, because you see it working, right? You see the strategies, the modalities working together and giving support to the client. The other modality that's quite nice is the Safe and Sound protocol.
Mhm.
And I'm a real fan of that particular piece. It's not, it's kind of sits on its aside from, it's not a play therapy technique, obviously, but it is supportive to the healing process as a foundation. And it is something that I recommend to everybody I speak to or mentor about. You should really look into this, because that polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges is phenomenally brilliant. It speaks the language of, regulation and rhythm setting and stability and all of those pieces. And so it really has been an extra piece that we brought into our practice too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure in your practice, probably at both of your locations, I know that the Burlington location is a bit newer, but the dire need for children's mental health post-pandemic. Have you seen a surge in that, and what are you noticing?
We sure have seen a surge, and in many areas, there's a lot of children, so many more children with anxiety than we had before. The little children, the pandemic babies, are just entering into the school system and don't have the milestones or the developmental skills yet. There's a missing component there. And part of it, I think, is because of the masks. Those, they haven't learned how to read the facial cues, and they're stressed. And so this ties into the vagus nerve and the polyvagal theory again. There's a lot of stuff happening that's alarming their system into dysregulation. So there's a lot of little ones out there that are really challenged when they're entering into the social world, because they've not had that privilege through their early foundational few years of life, because the pandemic created that isolation. So that we're seeing a lot of youngsters, we're seeing a lot of school-age children who don't have the capacity to manage the average healthy side of anxiety or new transitional kind of experiences. They're overwhelmed with those pieces. We're seeing a lot of young teenage adolescents struggling. And parents, of course, are really struggling as well. But we certainly see this as the after effects, I think.
Yeah. So the next question that I have for you is the phrase "play is the voice of the child." Can you tell me what that means for you?
I love that phrase, because it really is. If you watch the child, any child, a child of 2 playing with their little blocks or putting something in and out of a container, a child, a school-age child, a toddler. I'm a grandparent of 7 children, grandchildren, and another one on the way. And it's such a blessing to be able to just sit back. As a young parent, we don't have the time or the opportunity. We're too tired. We're too busy. We're doing all of those things to really appreciate the child when they're just quietly playing amongst themselves and doing their thing. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. A child sitting there figuring out their world. They might take the babies and play what they've experienced as a baby. They're acting out what they've been experiencing themselves in their world. And we see that all the time in their play if we just take a moment to sit back and watch. Unfortunately, for children who have not had positive experiences, we're seeing that in their play as well. They're using these moments, interacting with playful items, to figure out what their world has given them, what their experience in their world has been like, because that's all they know. And so they don't have the capacity to communicate language-wise all the time. Some can talk, but it's hard enough for an adult to figure out why they're feeling the way they're feeling, or what occurred in their life that made them, do this or that. It's really, really challenging for a child to do that. So play is the way into who they are and what they want to become and what they've experienced. And
Isn't it?
it's a really beautiful moment to be able to witness that and be a part of that, even through the hard parts. One of my supervisees was talking about one of her clients just yesterday in describing the play that this little one was going through. And this child has been diagnosed with PTSD because of her horrific start to life. And it's coming out in her play, and it's not coming out consciously. She's stuck in this reenactment of, and it's her brain, I think as humans, her brain wants to figure it out. It wants to untangle that messy ball of wool there that's all mixed up and tangled into knots. It needs to do it, and it's going to find a way to do it, whether it's adaptively or maladaptively.
Mhm.
And kids will do that through their reenactment of these scenes.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it really is the voice of the child.
It is, and it's such a privilege to be a part of that as
It is, yes.
as a therapist. So, I'm wondering, as we sort of, come to the end of our interview here, do you have any words of advice for people that are interested in becoming play therapists, or new clinicians that have recently been trained, with all of your knowledge and experience?
I sure do, and I bring it back to the phrase that I use is follow the journey, trust the path that you're on. And I say that because my journey, there were many parts of my story, of my career, to getting me to where I am now. There were many, many times, and some of those I included in our talk today, where I didn't know why I was being pulled in that direction. Why did I need that teaching role? Why did I need to leave teaching to go into this? But I needed to do it. I was being pulled. Well, there's many times that has happened, and it's not an impulsivity. It's different than the impulsivity. It's something that talks to you constantly. It's in your mind. And I've learned to just put my head down and follow the path and trust it, because I don't know where it's taking me necessarily. But once I'm there, I look back and go, oh, that's the reason why. Many times when I first started my journey as a play therapist, I'd look back and go, well, teaching was teaching, but I'm sure it won't have any impact on what I'm going to do now. It has every impact on what I'm doing now.
Mhm.
Not because I'm now teaching others, but because having the understanding of what the children go through in the school system and being able to support the families and the children from the other side, and support the teachers in that regard as well. So everything is connected, whether we understand it or not. And so my advice to those who are querying, should I change my career path? I changed it when I was, turning 40, which, at the time I'm like, I'm too old to do this. Now I look back and it's like, oh, I was really young back then, because I'm not 40 anymore.
Yeah.
But many of us are wondering, oh, should I or shouldn't I? But if it's speaking to you and it's something, really take the leap, follow the path, trust it,
Mhm.
and it will lead you where you're meant to be.
Yeah. And I love the words that you've used in what you've described there, the journey, right? It's a journey. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily a destination, because you never know what is going to happen along that path, along that
Right,
journey that's going to
right.
pull you to where you need to be. So,
And for me, it's not the end point.
yes.
It's the path that's really exciting. The journey to it is the exciting part.
It's
That's the exciting part. It's not the end result. And
mm,
for me, there isn't an end result. There's always the next step.
right,
Like, where's my path taking me next? Like,
right,
you
right.
know,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lorie, for your time here today.
I appreciate the time. It's been really exciting talking to you.
It's very as I continue to do these interviews with people, what I'm seeing is sort of this weaving through, and the connection between different people in the community across Canada. And for me, that's one of the most interesting things, because um as play therapists, as a new clinician, I remember feeling so sort of isolated, right? But recognizing that we're all part of something bigger across Canada, and the opportunities that we have to, create a community of play therapists is pretty phenomenal. So,
and I just as a last piece, I am so proud of our Canadian therapists. We are exceptional. I've trained a lot of people around the world, and the level of professional skill and education and commitment and loyalty to a job that sometimes just has not a lot of rewards, financially or there's a whole bunch of challenges for us as therapists out there. But oh my gosh, what a great group of people we have in Canada.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah. And we're going to keep making it stronger, which is so awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Good luck with this podcast. I think it's fantastic. That is just great because you're reaching Canadians all over the place, and probably others outside of Canada as well, because podcasts are wonderful to listen to no matter where you live in the world. So that's very exciting, and I'm very proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lorie.
Take care.
This podcast was proudly brought to you by the Purple Butterfly Healing Centre in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. For more information about the Purple Butterfly Healing Centre and child and play therapy, please visit our website at www.purplebutterfly.ca.